All right, folks, we are truly dealing with some absolutely crazy times. The twice impeached, criminally convicted felon in chief, Donald Trump. He just lied, lied, lied. I'm going to get into a lot of that a little bit later. Let me right now bring up retired United States District Judge Vanessa Gilmore, who joins us now. Judge, always glad to have you here. How long were you a federal judge?
Almost 28 years, Roland.
Okay. As somebody who was sworn to uphold and protect the Constitution, either take an oath, you were a part of the one of the three branches of government as executive, legislative, and judicial. What do you say when you hear a vice president of the United States, an individual who occupies the Oval Office, because I don't call him president, when you hear Elon Musk and Republicans in the House and Senate literally support them ignoring a judicial ruling? Is this insane?
Roland, I thank you so much for having this really important conversation. You know, our democracy is like a three-legged stool. The three branches of government, the legislative, the executive, and judicial, are like a three-legged stool. And if one or two of those legs are non-functioning, the entire thing collapses. And right now, we have the executive and the legislative, as you can tell by that clip that you just played a moment ago, basically gone from supporting the two of the legs of our democracy. And so that leaves only the judiciary as the only leg standing, and it's standing on a wobbly leg at that, because although there are lower court judges, district court judges like myself, and even appellate court judges that are pushing back against actions that are clearly unconstitutional, at the end of the day, that third leg could also fall, because as we know from some of the rulings of our Supreme Court over the course of the last year, the former and now current occupant of the Oval Office has secured things from that Supreme Court that basically support the type of unconstitutional behavior that we've been seeing. They have essentially held that he cannot be held liable for any criminal activity, and that it is executive power to do so. I mean, what happens when a judge issues an order and that order is ignored? There are only a couple of remedies. They are the contempt powers of the court. They're both civil contempt and criminal contempt. And in a civil contempt situation, if a judge's order is ignored, then we enforce that order by demanding that it be complied with. And our only remedy in that scenario is a fine. If there is a criminal contempt, then there's a possibility of a fine or jail time. But the Supreme Court has already said that there cannot be any jail time. And even if somebody wanted to go down that path, who enforces the judge's criminal contempt proceedings? Well, it's a two-part step. First, the local U.S. attorney has to represent the court as the prosecutor. And the U.S. attorneys are selected by the President of the United States. And then the Marshal Service has to actually go out and enforce the orders of the court. The Marshal Service is under the executive branch, which means that the Attorney General of the United States would have to be the one to give the order for the Marshal Service to enforce our orders. So basically, there's nobody that would be in place to enforce the potential criminal contempt that might be handed down or meted out if a federal judge's order is ignored. So we're in a catch-22 where all three of the legs of the stools of our democracy are basically gone.
And the thing that's insane with that is, as you laid out, because again, the criminal referrals go to the Department of Justice. The Attorney General has to decide. Pam Bondi's already made it clear that I'm gonna do whatever the hell Trump wants, and so she doesn't have that. And so in that clip, you heard Speaker Johnson talk about, well, you know, there's a presupposition that the president is going to be a good steward of the resources. Yeah, there's also a presupposition that the person who occupies the Oval Office is not going to act in an unlawful manner. It's going to have a respect for the Constitution. It's going to have a respect for judicial rulings. What these people are saying is that we don't want to listen or hear anything from any federal judge unless it's the Supreme Court. And that simply is not the system, because last I checked, there were a number of federal judges who ruled against President Joe Biden, and Republicans glorified that. They had no problem when federal district judges issued such rulings in the last 4 years.
Think about it. There's precedent in history, Roland, for exactly what you're saying. Think about going back to Brown versus the Board of Education, when the Supreme Court decided that the schools of the South had to be desegregated, and the states of the South, and even some of the judges of the South, weren't willing to stand up and enforce what the Supreme Court said. Robert Kennedy was Attorney General then, and he sent U.S. troops, the National Guard, to support James Meredith to help him get into the University of Mississippi. That shows that leadership has to come from the top. And the leadership at the top is the one that enforces the orders of the president and the orders of the courts. And we have an unprecedented situation here where we have leadership at the top that is not following orders of the federal judges, that is not following orders of the Supreme Court, and we have a Supreme Court, unfortunately, that is giving cover to essentially unconstitutional and illegal actions.
And to your point there, Jack Bass has a fantastic book. I have it on the shelf called Unlikely Heroes. It is an account of those federal judges on the Fifth Circuit, the role that they played in Brown versus Board of Education. It's called A Vivid Account of the Implementation of the Brown Decision in the South by Southern federal judges committed to the rule of law. There were federal judges who made erroneous rulings, who were then overruled by other federal judges who were saying, I don't care, frankly, if you're a racist and you're a Southern Dixiecrat. You are there to speak on the law, not your opinion, the law. And that's what happened. And they said, we do not care. And that's why Black folks, NAACP, Legal Defense Fund, and others kept going back to the federal courts. And in fact, in Louisiana, the Louisiana legislature would pass a bill. They would go right to the courts, get an injunction. They would pass another bill the next day to keep Black kids out of school. They would go right back and get another one. If you did not have those federal judges honoring the U.S. Constitution, you would not have had Jim Crow brought to its knees.
You're exactly right on that. You are exactly right. The judges are really the last line of defense in enforcing the Constitution of the United States. And so we have to have the judges in place to enforce the law as it is written. And we have to have persons who feel obligated, who understand their obligation to follow the law as it's set forth by federal judges. You know, there's another good book that speaks exactly to the issue that you just raised, Roland. It's called Let Them Be Judged, The Judicial Integration of the Deep South. And it talks about how the judges stood at the forefront of making sure that the law of the land, which was the integration of the schools of the South, would actually take place. And there were 4 judges on the Fifth Circuit at that time who really decided that they were going to make sure that the mandate of the Supreme Court to integrate the schools of the South was going to actually be carried out. If it was not for the bravery and the courage of those 4 federal judges, we would not have been able to achieve the mandate that was dictated by the Supreme Court in Brown versus the Board of Education. We're at a very different time now, though, where the Supreme Court has actually basically said that the person that should be upholding the Constitution is going to be exempt and exonerated from any attempt to make him follow the Constitution of the United States. So we're at a point now where we don't have any of the legs of government to support what needs to happen to support our constitutional democracy. And that is a very, very dangerous place for us to be in.
Some people have said that we are facing a constitutional crisis. Others are like, oh, no, that's too early. We're not there yet. I disagree. I believe when you have the executive branch backed by their party in the legislative branch, as you already said, when they control the law enforcement apparatus, that is the U.S. Marshals, they control the FBI, they control the DOJ. When they are operating in concert, I dare say this is a constitutional crisis.
There are no checks and balances right now. The legislature should check the executive branch. The judicial branch should check the executive branch. Right now, we have the legislature, the legislative branch, Congress, basically acquiescing because it's controlled by the Republican Party, acquiescing to anything that the executive branch says. And the executive branch, that includes the Attorney General of the United States, is not willing to do anything to stand up to constitutionally improper conduct. And then the judicial branch is kind of standing there hobbling on that one leg, trying to be the force that keeps the stool standing up. But right now, I don't think that it's an overstatement to say that we are in a constitutional crisis.
Obviously, I don't want you to reveal private conversations, but I'm quite sure you judges are like the rest of us. Y'all have group chats and things along those lines, and constitutional law professors. What are you hearing from your fellow judges, whether they are current or retired and law professors? I mean, are people are they expressing real concern with what they've witnessed in barely the first month of this administration?
Well, you're right, Roland. Judges are just like everybody else. We gossip, we get together, we chit and we chat. But we have had many conversations about what is going on offline, and I would not say anybody that I've spoken to about this issue, but there have been several of my former colleagues, and they fluctuate between being terrified and being completely perturbed and mad and angry at what is going on with respect to a failure to recognize the sanctity of the orders of federal judges. Many of them are just completely furious about the blatant disregard for the rule of law as it is being handed down by various federal judges in orders in cases that are pending across the United States. I don't know that there has been any consensus on what can be done other than everybody is just saying that they're just going to keep doing their job, keep fulfilling their oath to uphold the Constitution and laws of the United States, because that is the oath that we took, that judges take, and that is all that they can do. Try to fulfill their oath to follow the Constitution and laws of the United States, but trust and believe it is a big source of discussion among federal judges right now.
And I am sure that discussion is not just democratically appointed federal judges, it's also federal judges appointed by Republicans.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's across the board. People are either terrified or furious, and just frankly appalled that judges that are following the law can have their orders, their constitutionally correct orders, ignored in the way that it is. And for the legislative branch to support the ignoring of federal judicial orders is really just a slap in the face to both that entire branch of government and frankly to the American people.
All right. Retired federal judge Vanessa Gilmore, I certainly appreciate you joining us on the show.
Thank you.